Hello, welcome to the Shelly Show. I'm Shailendra and you're watching this simulcast live on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook and YouTube. Hope you're safe and maintaining the social distancing as it is very important. In today's episode, we will talk about importance of ethics in artificial intelligence. And to discuss this, I have very special, not three, four guests from three different continents who have been working on artificial intelligence for past few years. And I think it is a good idea to talk to them about this. It is your opportunity to ask them questions. So if you've got a question, put them in the comment section and we will take it. My first guest is Rudeon Snell from SAP. Rudy has a passion for solving problems using technology. He currently leads go-to-market for the industries and customer advisory business across EMEA at SAP. He has more than 20 years of experience working for leading organizations such as Microsoft, Deloitte, Vodafone, and Grintech. So let me bring him on. Hi, Rudy. Welcome to the Shelly Show.
Shelly, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Good. Can you please wait? Let me get other guests as well. We are full on at the moment. My second guest is Brent Schneeman. He's the CEO of a large AI-based company, a storyteller. Brent has presented at the UT Mekong School, South by Southwest, NLP Day, Multi-Data Days, and various meetups. He has one degree in mathematics and another in electrical engineering and lives in Texas. So it must be late night for him, if I'm not wrong, with his wife and three kids. I was just about to say 3 wives and 1 kid. 2 cats and 1 dog. While he spends most of his free time mowing the lawn, he enjoys making photographs, running around downtown, and occasionally tries to make sense of neural network architectures. Let me bring him on. Hi, Brent. Welcome to the show. As I said, I was about to say 3 wives and 1 son.
Just 1 wife, 3 kids. Just
perfect. No worries. Yeah. Let me bring others as well. Then I've got Dr. Avik Sarkar. He's a very good mate of mine. We've been working together on various shows for the past few years, I think 2 to 3 years now. And he was recently was part of the Government of India's initiative around data analytics, which is working for Niti Aayog. And so let me bring him on. Hi, Avik. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Shelly. How are you doing?
Always very nice. Good. Welcome to the show. So the 5th guest we have today is Laurence Liew. He's director at AI Singapore, and as director for AI industry innovation, he's passionate about getting companies in Singapore to adopt AI to stay competitive and relevant. So let me bring him on. Hi, Laurence. Welcome to the Shelly Show.
Hi, Shelly. Yeah.
Perfect. So before I start the questions, I would like to advise or request all my audience that for you to view this episode and other sessions that are on Emerging Technologies Live, I would request you to follow me so you can be alerted when a live session is on. This gives you an opportunity to ask questions directly to our guests, like we've got 4 today. And so what I suggest is please press the follow button on LinkedIn, follow button on Twitter, and subscribe on YouTube. And smash the bell icon so that you get alerted. Okay, let's get with the questions. Guys, welcome, very, very welcome to the show. So the first question is around the bias in algorithms. So how can we make sure that algorithms are fair, especially when they're privately owned by corporations and not necessarily accessible to public scrutiny? Who would like to go with it? Should I start with Laurence? Laurence, you work in that space a lot. What do you think? How do you think that we can remove the bias when the data is not shared so collectively at the moment?
Yeah, so it's really more of the biasness in the data rather than the algorithms itself. So when we implement the AI projects for companies, we make sure that we put in place processes to inspect the data and to talk to the business owners, right? To make sure that whatever data they are feeding us do not have any inherent biasness in there. So we are very particular about that. So we want to make sure that the data quality is there. The biasness, if possible, will be removed at the data stage, so that by the time it gets into the algorithm, there'll be less of an issue.
Okay. Brent, what do you think about it?
Oh, I totally agree with what Laurence said there, right? Most of the bias is in the data. And we have to make sure that the distributions of the data that we're going to learn on are relatively unbiased, right? We've got equal representation from the different types of labels as we go. One thing that maybe the public could possibly do, or what companies could do, is partner up with other companies, other governmental agencies, perhaps, and have like standard data sets against which we can test things, right? So we know what the bias is on these publicly available data, or we know how to describe these publicly available data sets, and can we convince companies and people who own private algorithms to publish at least the results of testing their model against those public data sets that everybody can look at and agree with.
Rudy, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think this notion of bias in AI is probably one of the most critical topics of our time, right? So especially if you consider the importance of a technology such as AI. I think when we talk about bias in AI, what we need to be clear about, and it's been alluded to now, bias doesn't come from AI algorithms. Bias actually comes from people, and it is then manifested in these algorithms. So if you think about data, which is kind of the foundation of AI, data sets are like textbooks, right? They both have human authors, and those human authors actually have biases. And then I think the other thing we need to be very cognizant of is that there are a lot of various definitions for bias, and that's part of the problem in the field. How can we expect to fix something if we cannot even agree on defining it? And the very dirty little secret that very few people want to talk about in the field is that being human actually means being biased. We are overloaded by sensory information. I think every second, about 11 million bits of information hits our brain, and we can only consciously process about 50. So fixing bias in AI is really hard. But as we've been talking about now, being aware of it, identifying the type of bias, proactively making sure that that is part of our development process, those are some of the steps that we can take to actually fixing bias within AI.
Okay, Avik, what are your thoughts?
Yes, so I think all the others panelists have given excellent views on that. I would like to focus on one particular example, and I see Laurence also here. He's from Singapore, and this is a use case which I had developed quite some time back in 2014-15, around that time, for the Singapore government. So they have an app for the municipal services organization where a citizen can report a problem, and that problem is automatically classified into what it is. So it might be about a tree falling down near a bus stand, tree falling down in a locality, or say a building breaking down. Now, when we are training our algorithms, we are training it on the past data. And as you can see from the type of 2-3 examples I gave you, it is more likely that we'll have, like when there's a thunderstorm, a tree falling down and breaking down in somewhere else, as compared to, say, a building breaking down. A building breaking down is a very rare event. So the data that we got to start with, the historic data of last 2-3 years, which the Singapore government gave us for training, I was doing it as a part of Accenture, this project, was itself biased. And there are a lot of theory around creating synthetic data and all, but until unless you have real data, you do not get all that variation and stuff. There are very good packages that have come up with to handling bias by Microsoft, IBM, and other places, which at least helps you understand what are the tools and techniques. And very important thing is to know whether bias is there, because if we know that bias is there, then if something is getting classified into one of those categories which are less training data, we can take some action after the classification or after the prediction has been done. So knowing is first a very important thing, and we have to first take engineers to be aware and know about that.
Okay. Brent, You work in that space a lot. So, and also that working in machine learning area, how do you tackle that problem technically? And possibly, if someone else wants to share their experience as well, how do you do that for the benefit of the audience? Can you share with them if you see some kind of a data which looks like is not normally distributed and has got some bias in it? Is that what you look at up front, or is that when you're running the model, that's where you're looking at it?
Looking at bias is kind of like the entire life cycle of the modeling project, from initial data collection all the way to deployment of the final algorithm, right? So it's not compartmentalized into one particular phase. In my company that I was working for in the past, we were a data annotation company, and we would look at the customer's request right up front and try to determine, okay, is even the fundamental question that they're trying to answer, is that somehow biased in one aspect or another? And I loved what Rudy said there, right? Being human is being biased. I think that we brought in our own biases when we were judging the customer's questions, and we were like, well, you know what, if this algorithm gets out there, is this going to unfairly punish a certain segment of the population depending on the use case and stuff like that? So we would start right up at the beginning asking questions about the question, part of it like an ethical review committee, something along those lines, and we would kind of go through and look at it from that point of view. And then we would start, we would get the training data from the customer and start to take a look at the distributions of that training data. And as you asked, right, is it normally distributed? Do we have equal representation of different classes, if it's like a classification type of a problem? Do we have more or less equal representation of each of those classes? And if we don't, how do we get around that? We could artificially remove some of the overrepresented classes, but then you might have some problems with your model. And so some of the more technical details would be like bootstrap sampling and oversampling of the underrepresented classes and those sorts of stuff. And then we were starting to explore some of the synthetic data, like Snorkel and a few of those other type of algorithms to help us generate new synthetic data. But we never really got our arms around that very well. So I can't really comment about that.
Okay, so that if I just try and think that through, that means the bias lies in the data, right? And it's an example which I always give is around the fact that if you're a telco and you're trying to sell iPhones, and there is a new product that comes in which is not an iPhone, it will say, well, more iPhones will be sold, and that new product won't be sold, whereas you haven't even seen whether that new product is. What is the market for that new product? I would want to know any examples. So Avik mentioned a very good example around the Singapore government. Any other glaring example that comes to your mind, Rudy or Laurence? Rudy, around bias?
Yeah, I mean, I think our media is starting to get littered with these sort of examples. Just the recent one of the biggest online retailers recently pulled their resume recommendation algorithm because it actually interrogated all of this data beforehand. And as we know, AI algorithms feed off data and continually improves themselves based on the amount of data. And then it was predisposition towards male applicants versus female applicants. If you consider that the vast amount of data actually represents that certain males only sit in certain roles. So we see all of this types of phenomena manifesting itself across various sort of scenarios. And it's incumbent on technology providers to ensure that bias, as Brent mentioned, is part of the design process end to end, and making sure that we remedy that, because people are going to be putting their faith and trust in these algorithms, whether it's legal algorithms in law that make recommendations on parole and sentencing, or whether it's even this discrimination based on skin tone. These are things we must be very aware of.
Laurence,
Can
you
I
would add-
can I just add something, Shelly?
Yeah, go on, Avik.
Yes. So I think what Brent and Rudy touched upon a very, very important aspect, and I just want to add on to that and emphasize on that aspect. When anyone learns about AI or machine learning, the only thing that they are learning, the objective function, is to increase the accuracy
Yep.
with your test data or the validation data or the training data. This mindset has to change. What I really liked what Brent told, and that's what I want to reiterate on. The very aspect that ethical concerns and also what Rudy mentioned, after you have built, you realize that that example of say the resume one. After you have built the model, you identify that this is an issue. So this doesn't come in the beginning. After you face some of the challenges later down, then you come back and revisit that. And even if you see the biggest platform, Kaggle, if you see, all algorithm and all competitions are focused on increasing accuracy.
Yep.
You you find out. So they are the biggest one, run by Google. So if they don't start, how do you expect the students and researchers across the world to follow? So though they have to put in the elements of this ethical aspect, liability of liability comes in if you're in a company scenario. All these aspects has to come in from the core learning. And another big thing, at least from Indian perspective, I cannot comment for the education system in the other countries, is that the science education and the arts education are completely different.
Yep.
The two worlds don't talk to each other, and they think that if you are doing science, then you don't need to know anything about arts. At least in India, that's the thing. So,
I understand that.
they have to talk to each other. They have to learn from each other, and I don't know how the education system will evolve. Like AI training needs to have ethics in there and understand these issues. Only then they can think about putting them in the algorithm. So, very good points by Brent and Rudy. I think this has to be part of the design process. To do it.
Right.
Laurence?
Yeah, so Brent mentioned about the various techniques that engineer or scientists would typically use to make sure that the data is clean or unbiased. You have companies like IBM that have come up with their 360 fairness toolkit and so on and so forth. So those are great once you have the data. But one of the critical process that we have within our AI Singapore programs when we approve AI projects is the team will get together and say, what are the business issues here that we're trying to solve, and are there any ethical concerns?
Yep.
So as leaders, as senior leadership, in looking at all the incoming projects, the first question we ask is, are there any ethical concerns? We don't even ask whether is the data clean, are there data?
Yeah.
We look at the business statement and say, are there any ethical concerns? Only then, when we are comfortable, then do we go into getting the data and so on and so forth.
And to be honest, data can be manufactured and manipulated, as we all know. When you're talking about this kind of stuff, you know how the fake news model has been, all over the place. But if you see a machine which is learning from the data, which is fake, it will only generate more fake information. What do you guys have a thought on that? So anyone wants to take that up? How do you address that situation where there is a fake news, fake narrative that has been built, and now you see models predicting that that's reality, and they're just running towards advising people on that line, and that happened with things like coronavirus as well at the beginning. Avik?
Well, I think fake news is a complete different world in itself, and I think the way this is treated and shared on social media, that's one aspect to it. I think what the type of mechanisms that we have tried to see whether they work in Indian perspective is that the source that are sharing those news. We look at the trustworthiness of that source, give it a trustworthy score to the originator source who generated that news, and based on that, we try to see how reliable that news can be, and over time have a system to take care of that ecosystem in there. Yes, but I think the point that you bring in of the fake news and that coming up with the aspect of bias, I think that's also an important aspect that we can look into.
Okay. Anyone else wants to add, or should I move on to the next question? Okay. Before I get to the next question, I'll just let you know that we've got around about 50 people watching us. Guys, please, if you've got a question, shoot that in the comment section. And if you don't, we won't know what you're thinking. And also, if you've got any example of bias that you've seen, please mention that in the comment section, and we will have a discussion on that as well. So please use the comment section as much as you can, and also like and share this video with others so that people can learn from these four individuals who are very senior in their space. Okay, the next area that we want to go to is lethal autonomous weapon system. So should should AI be allowed to kill humans if there are robots that come into play? How do we control that? How do we work in those lines to actually avoid that kind of a situation happening? Who wants to go with this? Rudy, you want to go?
Yeah, happy to take a stab at this. So I think that's a great question, and I think it's closer than one might actually think, right? So China, the US, Russia, Israel, the UK, all of these economies, they are heavily investing in autonomous weapon systems. I think we need maybe two constructs to help guard and manage this. I think in the first instance, we need a new type of Geneva Convention almost for today to help regulate AI and its usage, and to decide what is right and wrong on a global scale, right? And then I also think we as industry really need a similar type of construct. So the Cybersecurity Tech Accord is a great example of this type of initiative, where the industry shows maturity, comes together and defines a set of standards and regulations that everybody abides to. I think without these types of constructs, we will have a new arms race under the premise of self-defense and nation-state preservation, and then all bets are off the table, right? So that's how I would come at this, to ensure that we don't venture into this very dangerous space that is a lot closer than what one might think.
Yep. Laurence, what do you think?
Well, in a way, Singapore, we have already implemented something like that. Not lethal, but useful. We got the Boston Dynamics, the dog, to actually roam around the parks to get people to social distance themselves, right? So it detects that people are too close, and the dog will just go there and I guess give some sort of warning to say, no, you're standing too close. So that's a very useful AI autonomous system. But I mean, when you talk about it being little, I agree with Rudy. We need some form of Geneva Convention. I'm just not sure how we're going to police that, if at all possible. I mean, when in a conflict or in a war, the goal is to win. And if today you restrict the machine from being able to target more than 100 people, according to convention, the guy will just turn off that switch, and all of a sudden his AI system can target 1,000 enemies at one time, right? But nevertheless, hopefully, some form of Geneva Convention, or setting down the rules and regulations on how a conflict can and should be fought, if we go into that. And when it comes to AI, probably it has to be, somehow man in the loop. A human needs to be the one that actually press the button.
Yep. Okay. But who will decide what a human is thinking? That's a different question. We'll come to that. Avik, what do you think about weapon systems?
No, this is a very important aspect and has been debated a long time in the AI ecosystem also. I think a convention is the easier part, but I think I would agree with what Lawrence was mentioning. How do you implement it, and how do you ensure that people are not disobeying that and developing their own systems, how do you ensure that? But I think that is the difficult part here with AI. Like say, all of us know about Project Maven, where I think Google told that they will not participate in that activity. But then 6 months down the line, there were a range of 50 plus companies who are ready to do that. So, and not everyone would think in those same ethical lines, because I think companies are still driven by profitability, and I think that aspect, I think companies having an ethical aspect and not doing it, I think it has to be more of a collective thing. Even if the state wants to do it, and if private companies don't do it, that's one thing. And even if private companies do it, so it also has to the fact that international people, like say, I want to develop in India, all the Indian companies do not want to participate with me. But if, say, some foreign country participates with the Indian government to develop autonomous weapons, lethal autonomous weapon using, how can things also stop? So I think international technology transfer in this area also has to go under the close check. We haven't, we means the world haven't been very good even for checking the and tracking the nuclear weapons, which are much more easier to track because of the radiation aspect. With this, where everything is a piece of code, I think it's going to be very, very difficult.
No, that also reminds me that technically it is possible. Technically, it is possible to track and manage all of this. But is there a willpower amongst, and as you mentioned, the corporates, a private sector organization, because of their vested interests, may not be interested in tracking and so forth. What do you think, Brent, on this?
Well, on the autonomous weapons point of view, I was actually talking to my three kids, not my three wives, my three kids about this question earlier, and as it turns out, they actually totally agree with what Laurence said. Right? Can we make it so that there's a human in the loop, right? That the human actually pushes the button before that, before the physics gets engaged, I guess. But when I was talking to my kids, we had a couple of other thoughts here. One was, machines are getting smarter. They're getting really good at classifying between A and B. Is putting an autonomous weapon, putting AI into an autonomous weapon, is that weapon going to be able to classify better than a human combatant versus civilian, right? And then would the civilian deaths go down because of this, AI inside of that weapon? And that was an interesting concept that we were talking about. And I don't have an answer to that, but that certainly seems rational, right? I mean, that's ML tends to do that sort of stuff. We tend to get really good at that sort of thing. And so that was something that it was just an interesting side topic or thought that we had. Another one that we were thinking about is, a lot of AI is already inside of weapon systems, right? Yep. Threat prioritization, right? This is more dangerous than that, so focus on this thing first, right? And so, that is information that's being fed to the human operator to address the different threats in a cockpit or something along those lines. So AI is already there. I just don't know where we're going to go with, is AI actually going to be able to engage the physics side, right? Engage the kill switch. I think that in war, right, the goal is to win, and you want to win efficiently, and machines are going to make it much more efficient as time goes on.
And what is the American government thinking about it? Is there any government policy that you've seen, and you may not have, but if you've seen, can you share? Because we've seen the Singapore perspective, we've seen the Indian perspective, possibly get an American perspective. And Rudy, you may be thinking about what's happening in African and in the Middle East area. And is there any government policy that is coming around there? What do you think, Brent?
I am unaware of any American policy here. That is outside of my sphere. I really can't comment on that.
Okay. Rudy?
Yeah, so I think it's certainly being discussed from just the brief amount of literature that I've read on the topic. It's under discussion, nothing concrete as far as I'm aware. I think a lot of governments feel that it's still a couple of years out, and we see this with regulation generally, right? Regulation tends not to be able to catch up with the technological advances, and then they have to play catch up at a later stage. So I think it'll be a lot quicker and a lot more real very soon. If you look at the advancements that's happening specifically in drones, it's not that far-fetched to start having autonomous weaponized drone systems that can actually just operate as armies of drones out there, identifying targets and taking them out, right? And I guess the more challenging thing is what happens if those technology advancements falls into terrorist hands. That just brings a completely different spin on this entirely. So more to come on that.
Okay, good stuff. One thing that comes to mind, and before I get to the next question, I've just got an idea. We've got people, as I said, people watching. There are around about 50 people watching across all the channels. What I would want to see is two things. One is, guys, if you know what are your thoughts around lethal autonomous weapon systems? So put that in the comment section. Secondly, I always think that Facebook, I get more comments than I get on YouTube, and LinkedIn somehow very professional, and there are lots of people watching on LinkedIn, but there are less comments. So let's do a kind of a assessment at the end of the show. Which channel had the most questions today? So guys, if you're watching on LinkedIn, your channel is at stake. So put your comments in and your questions in as well. And if you're watching on YouTube, put your questions in there, and I would like to see which channel is asking more questions. Okay, to the next question. And also your experience and your thinking around lethal autonomous weapon system. Self-driving cars. As the self-driving cars are now going to become norm, and they will be deployed widely, who do you think should be liable for an accident? Is that the company which has built the car, the guy who's owning the car? You know, if there is a loss of life, who should be actually responsible for it? What are your thoughts on this, guys? So I will start with Brent this time.
I think if a self-driving car is engaged in self-driving mode, for the short term, I think the human who is sitting in the driver's seat has flipped that switch, fully expecting the car to take over, and that may or may not be a rational decision. In fact, I probably would not flip that switch for quite some time. And so, from that point of view, I think if there's a fatality of some sort, there's probably a shared liability, right? The algorithm probably made a mistake, but then the human trusting that algorithm has some culpability or some liability as well. As to the extent as to how on the meter who gets the greater share of that, I think that would probably be situationally dependent. Yeah.
Rudy, what is your thoughts?
Yeah, so this is a complicated matter, right? And it's due to this convoluted relationship between human drivers, technology providers, and legal liability. I think I like where Brent's leaning towards with regards to this. It has a lot to do with expectation management and expectation setting. So if you think about Tesla right now, it talks about driver assist. And it makes it very clear that a human driver should be in a position to take over at a moment's notice. I think once we move into fully autonomous mode, the literature on this topic seems to indicate that technology providers will bear the brunt of liability once fully autonomous vehicles hit the road. And again, it has a lot to do from a legal perspective with this notion of expectation management and setting. So if me as a consumer buys a fully autonomous vehicle, I expect it to come at a certain level of functionality and capability, and that has been communicated to me by the brand. So that's where I'm leaning towards on this one.
Okay, Laurence?
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, I mean, it's not very different in a sense that when you buy a laptop, the vendor has said the laptop can do this, and in the end it did not do it, then you basically return the laptop to the vendor and say, hey, it's not working. I want a refund. So when it comes to self-driving vehicles, if it's fully autonomous, then the car manufacturer, or whoever you buy the car from, would theoretically be liable. But in a way, there's this other side of the argument, right? Insurance. Ultimately, who will pay out will actually be the insurance company, because whichever vehicles that's put on the road, be it Toyota, Tesla, and so on, there will be huge insurance being taken out by the manufacturers of the car. And as a driver, you also be taking out insurance. So in whichever case, if there's an accident, okay, the insurance will determine who is responsible, and then the payout will happen.
Okay.
So in a way, we will use insurance to basically determine who finally gets paid.
Yep. Avik?
Yes, so I think this is a very, very interesting use case, and I teach a course at Indian School of Business on AI and society, and I spend almost a whole class talking about this and similar examples where who is a liability. So I think again, coming back to your first question, we can think of it as a problem of bias first, because we are thinking of an accident or a fatality. Where does the accident or fatality happens? In the case that it is driving in a condition on which it is not properly trained. Until unless you see someone coming immediately in front, which are like real accident, which even me, as a human driver, if I were driving and someone jumped in front of the car, then I couldn't have done anything to save it, and that would be a real accident. But then there are unseen scenarios that are there. So I think the system, as Brent was talking about, there has to be a lot of communication. It's not just you just come and hit. When you think of the system, there can be, to start with, notification. When it sees a very unknown scenario, it sends notification to the driver that it is not very comfortable with this scenario, and asks them to take over. I think having this constant communication also will reduce the liability, because again, what Laurence was talking about in insurance, I think, is very, very, very important aspect. And if say Tesla or Toyota had made the car and it told that, okay, the accident happened at 10:30 a.m. and at 10:15 a.m., 15 minutes before, I had given 5 important notifications to the driver that I am unable to manage this scenario and request you to take over. That will imply that the system has done its due task. Technology can only give you recommendation. Like my laptop, I give the example of laptop. My laptop is, say, running at 100% CPU for 10 days. Definitely the laptop performance will become bad after that. Or say I have a load limit on my car of, say, 200 kilos, and I am doing like 250 kilos on my car, carrying load of that for the last 2 weeks. And there is an alert mechanism that tells that, okay, you are crossing the limits, you're hitting the limits, you need to do a check. And if this sort of thing are communicated and this is documented both the back end, because if you see the EU liability thing, they have told that for the purpose of investigation, and that's where where all the insurance aspect comes in, for investigation and for the legal cases, all the messages, all the black box, all the logs be available to people to inspect, even though accident might have happened. So having things in place has to be will be the system more secure. So my thing is, the question you asked is a very interesting question, because it's like any beer table discussion. You start with this question and you can spend like hours discussing it, and this is that's what it is. But I think this is not a black and white thing. There has to be many things in between. What the human will do to mitigate the risk, what the company will do to mitigate the risk. There might be a third party who is providing data, and you will see the amount of driving level data available like say in US, you might find a lot of road condition driving data as compared to say China, which has the second one. India, it is very little. Intel has come up with a driving data for India, which is only a few thousand samples. So definitely it is only for research purposes, not for launching a live system. So I think all these factors will come into the system, and the user will be made and have to understand what are the factors on which the system is trained, and this whole communication has to happen in a very simple manner. Like in a case of a laptop, we give a 5-star rating, or a air conditioner, we give some sort of rating telling how good or bad the energy efficiency of that system is. I think those simplicity have to be brought in the system so that the two parties understand this, and there is a communication through alerts that will then develop over time.
Okay, I've got a comment here. Sorry, I have a comment here. I was thinking, because I was looking to buy a Tesla, I was told, Shelly, you can buy Tesla, but be careful. You won't find many insurers to insure you, and the insurance will be very high. And both of you guys have mentioned about the insurance aspect of it. If it is a liability of the consumer who's sitting in the car, not driving the car, who's sitting in the car, which is driving by itself and hits a person, and the liability is $20 million, right? Someone needs to look at it, because it's not his fault. He was just a passenger. It's like, it's like now, Avik, you driving the car, I was sitting with you, you hit the car somewhere, and then, I'm responsible for you hitting the car. I think there needs to be a proper discussion on this. And unless we find out what insurers are going to do about it, and what the industry and even the humans are going to do about it, I think we still have a bit of a challenge around that. Anyone wants to add something to this?
So I think we have to be very clear, right? Accidents on the roads happen, and with self-driving vehicles that are fully autonomous, the human error type of accidents will be reduced, not totally removed. But there will always be, like what Avik was saying, there will be some accidents that the AI have never seen before, and those will happen. Or if there's a malfunction in the brakes, for example, accidents will happen. For those type of accidents, standard insurance T's and C's will come in, right? The brakes failed. So, and why did the brakes fail? Was it because the person did not do a proper maintenance, or it is manufacturing fault, and so on and so forth? So ultimately, I think Shari, you raised a good point. When you buy a car, you better read the fine print carefully on the insurance, and especially if it's a self-driving vehicle, whether is it a 3-star, 4-star, or 5-star. What does the 5-star mean? Does it mean it is 100% self-driving? And when you say 100% self-driving, what exactly can it do? And if an accident happens, who's going to be liable? I think it will be an interesting purchase decision in the next 10 to 15 years.
Okay, and I want to bring something here further to that. And with self-driving cars, I used to joke a lot. I used to get on stage and tell people that the problem with self-driving cars in India is that there are lots of people who don't follow any rule. So if you've got a self-driving car, how will that operate? Either we will not have self-driving cars in India, which means that people in India will go overseas and say, oh, I saw a car driving by itself. Like in the good old days when they say, overseas, the clothes get washed by themselves. Well, they're washing machines. That was what we used to hear when we were kids. So it's going to get into that scenario. But if you think about it, if tomorrow India, or in the next 6 years or 7 years, India starts getting self-driving cars, how would they look at the fact that it was not the fault of the car itself? There was a guy who came in and bumped into the car himself. What do you do then? That's not a problem for the insurer. That's not the problem for the passenger sitting in the car. Whose problem is that? Because it's not. How do you identify that in the first place? Avik, do you have any comment on that?
No, I think having a detailed logs of all the incidents, and as you told, like if someone just jumped in your car, whether it's a self-driving car or a manual driving driven car, with even the best, the accident is most likely to happen in that case. So these are conditions that we cannot avoid with self-driving car. But I think having concrete logs of the system so that it helps you understand what has happened in the past will be very important. And not that we start inventing them when the case happens, but then there should be several flows and use cases that have to be discussed about what the liability, legal liabilities, what the insurance clause will be, given so and so conditions, so that they can be documented well. And having this information readily available is very important. Part of the work that I'm doing, the International Standards Organization, ISO, there is a body of all the nations to trying to come up with the standards for artificial intelligence systems in general, and what are the sort of standards, what for people to have trust on that systems. So this, like, I contribute to it from the Indian perspective. I think this, as Laurence was talking about, what does a 5-star mean? This was just an example that I've given. We have just started working on it last year, and I think it will take a few years to develop those standards. But I think the standards have to be made understandable for a layman. A person did not understand AI, but should understand what are the risks involved by buying that or that AI system. That has to be made very
Okay. Okay. Before I get to the next question, and I'm very passionate about that question, I would ask all the guys watching us, what is your point of view on self-driving cars? If you're in India, what do you think? Whether when the cars will be on the roads, whether that would be whose fault should it be? Who should pay for the insurance if there is an accident? And so put that in the comment section and let us know. And what is your point of view on self-driving cars, and who should be responsible? To put that through. And I'm still counting the number of comments coming in from YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook. Let's see which is the better channel today. Okay. The next question is very, very close to my heart. Every time I get onto stage, I say this: privacy is a myth. So how do we balance privacy and surveillance in the AI world? Now, my problem here is, and I'll tell you, when I was working at a retailer, they used to say that I know all, and that was true. Because I was working at a retailer, anyone who used to buy from me, I would know what, when, how much do they want. In fact, there was a very interesting story of a large retailer in US where, and I think Brent, you would know, and I don't know whether people know about this, when a girl was sent an underage girl was sent a condom, or it was a condom or a pill, pregnancy pill, by that organization, and which became a big issue. Now, but that's true. I know when I was running when I was part of the retailer, I knew who would need what, and we could predict that upfront and send you an information up earlier. And I also say privacy is a myth because the moment you leave your house, there is some CCTV footage which has actually captured your face and actually taken that and identified what you're doing, who you are, what you're doing, and so forth. So tell us, how do we balance privacy and surveillance? And I know Avik will have a point of view on that, because this was a big uproar in the government, in the parliament a couple of years ago in India. I think Laurence, you will have a point of view on that, and Brent and Rudy. So let's start with Laurence this time. Laurence, what do you think?
So I think this is really interesting, especially in this couple of months, right, with the COVID-19. I think in Asian context, where we a lot of Asian countries put the society first before the individual, right? And in that case, you see in Korea, in China, and even to a large extent in Singapore, when necessary, surveillance is accepted for the greater good of the society. So that's why Singapore, we come up with safe entry, trace together. We try to find out who's where to then do contact tracing and so on and so forth. So I think in the Asian culture, this sort of privacy, it's important, but depending on the situation, I think some of us are willing to give up a little bit for the greater good of the community and country as a whole.
And I think COVID has been a game changer in this, because prior to COVID, everyone was very reluctant to share their information, and suddenly everyone is happy sharing the information and downloading the apps and working through it. Rudy, have you seen a change in the mindset, and what do you think about privacy and surveillance, the thin line between the two?
Yeah, so I think it's a very important question for our time, right? I love what Laurence has highlighted, and I fully support that point of view. I think the only challenge that I see is that ratcheting up surveillance to combat the pandemic now could permanently open the doors for more invasive forms of snooping later. And that's just something we need to be very conscious about. I think people are willing to give up some privacy for the greater good, as long as the reason and the purpose for that is clear. It's when the purpose becomes foggy, like with Cambridge Analytica, that society has a problem with it. And then, Shaylee, you just mentioned this notion around how, if you just step outside, CCTV footage captures you. I think with the advent of 5G, this privacy thing will just completely explode. I mean, if you just look at China right now, I think you have roughly 626 million cameras in 2020 for their 1.43 billion people. So that's nearly 2 people for 1 camera alone, right? So what does that tell you about privacy in a world like that, right? So yeah, I love this view as, for the greater good, let's make sure the purpose is clear, and then provide people the option to opt in and opt out if required.
No, but I get your point. But in an environment where terrorism is also looked at, how can you opt in to say, it's my privacy, and I'm very privacy conscious, and I'm going to opt out of all these security footage. I'll tell you one thing. One of my very good mates of mine who actually built facial recognition algorithms and has brought it into the market. He used to say that when the Belgium airport terror attack happened, he said that if my systems were there, we would have predicted that there is going to be an attack before the attack happened. Now, of course, there was all that information, all that footage about that individual, but not knowing that, we had loss of 20 people's lives.
Yeah.
So it is important to understand whether the thin line between the privacy and surveillance, and I think there are certain things we can't get over, and so we need to be very, very focused on capturing some information. What do you think, Brent, on this?
Well, I think the American culture is a little bit different than a lot of the Asian countries, right? America has a historical context of individual rugged individualism and a lot of very individual privacy rights and stuff like that. We are not so much of a surveillance society. We don't have that degree of surveillance. However, like you pointed out on the intro to this topic, right? Our retailers know everything, right? They knew that this young woman was very likely pregnant, so the retailer was sending her all sorts of coupons, and her dad was like, "What's going on?" Right? So privacy is a myth, but it's a pretty strong held belief in the American just psyche, I guess, our zeitgeist. That's going to get probably in the way of our response to COVID, right? There's going to be a large swaths of America that are just not going to want to share that type of information, and that's probably going to have some public health implications there. The flip side, though, is what I've noticed is when it comes to establishing order from like a law and order perspective, a lot of Americans are, we're okay with surveillance being done to that other group over there, not my group, but that other group over there. So it's a pretty big political issue here in America, and I don't know how that's going to play out. Right? It's just it is what it is, and we're going to have to deal with it.
Okay, before I go to Avik, guys who are watching, think about it. What do you think? Whether it is so, if you were to choose between privacy and surveillance for at the cost of life, what will you choose? Put that in the comment section. Avik, I think it was a big issue in the parliament a couple of years ago, and there were lots of issues. A lot of people saying, "Oh, you were surveilling. You're putting a surveillance onto me." Where has it gone, and what do you think is happening there?
So there are different layers to it. So I think what happened in Parliament a few years back was that privacy was not fundamental right as per our constitution.
Yep.
Since the nation was formed in 1947, and there were two Supreme Court judgment in 50s and 60s telling that privacy is not a fundamental right until and a case that came out in 2017 under which privacy became a fundamental right. That's the more of the historic perspective. So we have been working on data privacy bill for the last 2 years, and this has gone through public scrutiny, our discussion with stakeholders and other things, and it is now with the parliament, and hopefully by the end of this year that will become a privacy law. Then there will be added regulation in India. That it is quite in line with the GDPR, which is there for Europe, for the Indian. Now, COVID brings the added of surveillance and like Singapore had a contact tracing app, we had developed a contact tracing app which was available for the last 2-3 months. But then there was a lot of hue and cry about it, about privacy, how long the data will be stored, and things here and there. So just yesterday, the news that happened just yesterday, contact tracing app by the name of Argya Setu, the source code of it was made open source. It was available to so individual groups could go and scrutiny and see where the data is stored and everything. So I think this was a big debate and big on this front, and this is just something just happened just yesterday. But I think another thing happens is that, so these are all the apps where we are your agreement being in data. But you see, there's a lot of data being captured on the social media platforms like Google, Facebook, and things of that nature. And these are very intricate details of our liking and for what we are doing, what are the type of I'm liking, what are the type of comments I'm making, and this made it available by the government, how many requests are there, data requests, and what is their fulfillment. See the fulfillment rate for the US government on any data request by Facebook is above 90%. Anything that the government wants to know, the US government about any Facebook user, be it based anywhere in the world, they have all access to this. And this is a thing like if it's a US company, then the US government can get access to that. And for other countries also. This is a similar number, the Indian to Facebook, and the percentage fulfillment is less than 50%. So there's a stark difference between fulfillment rate if the company is in your own or not, and there are this Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, which are the Chinese companies. So even though there is what was mentioned about the cameras, the surveillance cameras, even though if you leave out the surveillance camera bit, there's a lot of data that has been collected on the social media platform, like how much are we spend on what type of thing, which is a very information that gives about how much wealth I have. So that this sort of information can be easily accessed by the government. Now, if it's been used for good, I'm all for it. But you never know what sort of things they might be using it.
I love
where the fear lies.
I love the aspect of open sourcing the surveillance systems. I think that's like a huge step right there, right? I think that's a brilliant step. Yeah.
No, that's good. But my point of view on that is that even if we make privacy a fundamental law or fundamental right of any organization or in any country, I think that will go out of the window when 5G comes into play and everyone will be using it. we are where we are at the moment, but this is my personal view. It won't stay because of the fact the people who are actually, and I'm conscious about the fact people in the parliament who do not understand anything about technology and data, when they get in write a law where they say, oh, it's all very privacy, and when they will see technically there is always a workaround there. I think it will just go out of the window. But anyways,
So just maybe just a
I
quick
think
comment.
that is very true.
Just a quick comment.
That is very true. Just a short comment
Okay,
I would like to make.
yeah.
Yes. So sorry, just a quick comment I wanted to add. Essentially, yes. So this constitution, these laws are the framing of this, and this becoming laws takes a long time, and technology is faster than that. I think that is a major problem that we are facing today. Like privacy and all these things were there at 50 years back, 30 years back, but we didn't talk so much about it because they are not being stored in a single place. Now with digital technologies and our going online, now with COVID, everything that we are doing is online, even like online meetings. Like they will see that the five of us were together, and there will be some network built between other things that make it happen. So I think this is a aspect where I think laws cannot move as fast as the technology is. That's what the challenge I see. Sorry,
Rudy.
Yeah, just very quickly. So what we're talking about here is a clash of philosophies, right? I fundamentally believe in this notion that my data is mine, it's private. I can choose to share it with whoever I want. And we see the how this permutates itself through society. So if you just look at I think it was one of the bombing incidents where Apple refused to provide the government with access to the user's iPhone because of the precedent that it sets, and also because of the view around what that means from a data perspective. I get your point, Shaylee. With everything that's happening in this world, how can we not leverage all of this in order to make it a safer place? And I think the answer is not an either or. It's finding that happy medium in between where people are okay to share their data for the greater good, but still know that they have the option to remain and keep certain things private should they choose. And what you'll also find is that with enough people making themselves and their data available for certain functions and capabilities, there'll come a critical mass where it's actually more disadvantageous to be out of the loop than to be in the loop.
Yep.
And that's something that we'll see evolving moving forward as well.
Okay, guys, I'm thinking of doing a little poll very, very quickly, and it is a yes and no answer, and this is open to audience as well. The question is, should AI be given the same rights as humans? So human intelligence and artificial intelligence should both have the same rights. Answer should be yes and no, yes or no, and why do you say that? Support that with your one-line comment. And I'm not going to be spending too much of time on this. I'll very quickly go to Avik. Avik, what do you think? Should they have the same rights? Yes, no?
Not now. Maybe after 100 years.
Okay. Laurence, what do you think?
Not now. If we get to the stage of sentient data like Star Trek data, then yes, but definitely not now.
Not now. Rudy, what do you think?
Yeah, it's already happening. Whether it's marketing stunts, whether it's companies appointing AI bots to their boards and giving them full rights as normal employees, already happening.
Okay, so you say yes?
Yeah.
Okay, Brent, what do you think?
I say no. There's no need to give rights to an arithmetic operator, and that's what they are.
Okay. Good one. So, guys, whosoever is watching, what do you think? Should artificial intelligence be given the same rights as people or humans? Please put that in the comment section. Finally, my questions will finish and the question answer session from the audience will start. And the final question I have is, who defines the ethics of AI? Who should we look at? Should we look at the ministers, the parliament? Should we look at the academia? Should we look at the corporates? Who should define the ethics for AI? And I will start with Brent this time. Brent, I'm catching you this time.
Sure. I wonder if we can frame ethics as kind of a marketplace of ideas. And those ideas, the ones that are used the most, are going to be the winners. And I wonder if that's a sufficient way to just define who defines what the right ethics are, right? Certainly governments are going to have a desire to say something. Industry is going to want to say something else. But ultimately, it's going to be what's the thing that everybody's going to adopt and use. And it's just going to be over time, those ethics are going to be defined by their use. I think that's probably a way to do it, probably the way it's going to happen, but I'm not really a deep philosopher in that field.
Okay, Avik, what do you think?
So I think there is a need for collaboration with different corporate people. A lot of my work that I'm currently engaged in these days is on that. And if you see bodies like International Standard Organization, ISO, they are also taking a multi-stakeholder view. So different stakeholders have their point, and that all has to be considered. Only then everyone will accept to something that is common.
Laurence?
I mean, if you look at ethics, really in a society is defined by the society, right? Not necessarily by a corporation or the government, but the society decides that it's ethically wrong to kill. So that's it. So for ethics and AI ethics, ultimately it will still be defined by the society. The government will want to come up with a set of rules and regulations. The standard organizations will come up with a set of rules and organizations. The commercial entities will come up with what they think is right. But I think the decision, or eventually how our society as a whole will determine what is the ethics of for our AI to operate, will be determined by the society as a whole.
Rudy?
Yeah, so I mean, this is a great question, right? To ask yourself, what is ethics? How do we define ethics? I think this notion of trying to define ethics has been around since the Athenian tripod, right? Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. And ethics differ just like values differ, and the way they manifest themselves across regions, that also differs. How we value life in the West is different to how we value life in the East. I think the golden thread that ties various regions together when it comes to ethics is this notion of fairness. And the hard truth for me around, who defines ethics in AI ultimately is that we as consumers actually do. We define the ethics of AI. And we do so by voting with our money, right? Regulators aren't able to keep up. Academia is often disconnected from corporate realities, broadly speaking. And as consumers, we hold the power to pay for the types of services we want and how those services are provided to us. And that then shapes how corporates eventually provide these value-added services to consumers.
Okay, before I get to the Q&A,
Yes, so just like to add one thing. I think we can all develop the ethic, but I think government and regulators has to play an important role in putting their rubber stamp on it and telling this is what it works for the country. And Laurence gave a very good example of killing. We all accept that killing is not the right thing, and society has decided that. But if someone goes and kills someone, then what happens to the person is something the law of the land, and this is like a country-specific law will define that. And in case of AI also, if something goes wrong and where comes in, the insurance aspect comes in, then we need these laws to kick in. And that, I think the government and regulator have a strong, it has to be a multi-sectoral view, but ultimately the rubber stamp from the government or regulator, but this is just my view. And also you can see the same act of killing in different countries across the world have different penalties. It's not the same. So you cannot think about the same sort of penalty for even AI system, like a self-driving car killing someone on the road, or maybe giving a wrong prescription in medical, in telemedicine or automated healthcare medicine. having the same penalty across different countries. Okay. So that is what you have to keep into view.
Perfect. Before I get on to the questions, I would ask this question to the audience as well. So audience, what do you think? Who should define ethics for AI, whether it should be the corporates, the academia, or the parliament? Or is there, or and the fourth point is collaboration, as mentioned by our guests as well. Okay, now I'll quickly get on to the questions. This is, guys, this is your last chance to ask these guys the questions, and we'll go very, very quickly. I will start. Okay, I'll have to go very, very quickly, guys. We're running short of time. Ullas Acharya says, hello. Hi, Ullas. How are you? No question. Kenneth Anthony. Hi, Kenneth. How are you? He's asking a question about how about bias, which is an extension of policies. For example, there was an article last year about US prison system data where it was skewed toward African Americans. This is continued, wait, which says, but this is technically not biased data, but a byproduct of legislation. Are AI companies legally responsible for models, or what else can be done? Laurence, you want to go?
Well, I mean, yeah. So kind of has a point. It is. Yes, the legislation or the way the society has generated that data sets, which then the algorithm use for training. Mm-hmm. So, like what you mentioned, the very early part of the show, right? The data is biased, but it is we humans, our own biasness that generated the biased data in the first place. Mm-hmm. So, that is really the whole thing about what Kenneth is saying. So it's never the algorithm, it's about the data, but because the data were generated by humans, then it's our human biasness that actually caused the algorithm to miscompute.
Okay. Rudy, what do you think?
Yeah, I would tend to agree with Laurence's assessment of that. The only thing that I would add there in terms of the role that it gets played is when it goes wrong, the consequences of it is very real. And of course, this case is actually the software is called Compass, I believe, and it's used in the States by a lot of organizations to gauge parole, etc. But yeah, the consequences of when we get this wrong is not academic, it's not abstract, it's real people, real lives that get impacted, and we need to make sure that we do our very best to get it as much right as possible. It won't necessarily be perfect, but it can be a lot better than what it currently is.
Okay, Brent.
So to answer Kenneth's question directly, are companies legally responsible for those models that are built on data that was representative of societal norms? Probably not legally, but maybe morally responsible to recognize that those are issues there, and how can those companies try to fix that, right? And then that kind of goes back to our prior comment about when that company tries to come out with this algorithm, are we going to buy it or not, right? If it's a biased algorithm, maybe we're not going to buy it. And the company that is that did the morally correct thing to remove that bias, that might win out in the marketplace over the other one.
Avik?
Yes, so I think it's a very good question, Kenny, that you see. And due to the human bias, we have maybe higher number of racial committing but when a human looks into this data, he will look only at the aspect of the crime and not the race, and trying to frame. So say a new lawyer has come in, wants to learn these things, but when the machine looks into this, it takes that race column also and then builds the model. And then that is where the concept that AI 360 has come up with IBM talk about this sort of variables like race. All the protected variables. And if you use a protected variable, you don't tend to use the model and see without this protected variable in part of your training, do you get equivalent accuracy or not? and that's one of the simple ways to address this.
Okay.
Yeah. So to address this one. So yes, well, you can remove the race column, but then what are the columns or what are the features that should be in, right? So if you include address, and which college he goes to, that may include the race information in there, because certain race are more widespread in certain locations, and they tend to attend this college. So that the race. So by the time you remove a lot of these features, the data will be so sparse that it's not going to be very useful. So it's a very tough problem. Really, what it means is that the company who's going to build the model needs to understand the problem. And don't just apply the model blindly, and how you which column to remove, it will affect the data. And maybe in the end, maybe this is something that not AI or machine learning should be doing. It should actually be a judge, to a human, that actually determine the sentencing.
Okay.
Yes, and also the example that Rudy gave in the beginning was about CV, like curriculum vitae classification, the profile classification. Even if you remove the column of sex or gender, you can see hobbies, you can see exactly the type of schools and knowledge they have gone into are very, very strong dependent of the gender.
Correct.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. Very quickly. Next comment from Vashishta Akshat. Hi, Vashishta. And she just said hi. Next, Avasti Mrityunjay. Hi, Avasti. How are you? There is a very pertinent question on Facebook, which is from Manohar Baliga. And he says, first of all, hi, Manohar. How are you? Why always have partiality at work when only work matters? Now, if I put that alongside AI, I think this has a very strong meaning. And can we use technology or AI to actually remove partiality at work? Is that a possibility? Who wants to have a go at that? Avik?
Yes, so I think, see, forms when we also select a person, we select the person based on, say, looking at the resume, shortlisting them, and then having the. If we can go to a system that the candidate is completely blind, we don't know anything about the candidate, and they do a common set of tests which has been given, and based on that test score, we shortlist the candidate without knowing anything about them, where they come from, which locality they live in, what gender they're in, what school they studied. So it might be that they have not gone to a very high class Ivy League colleges, but still they have gone very good score. And then take this. This is a mindset shifting about shortlist CVs. You have to start with some task and look at the output of the task rather than looking at the shortlisting of things. So systems, if they can, they will be completely blind. They will only look at the skill part, what you have and what have you done, and other things will be ignored.
Laurence?
I think this is an interesting question, especially in the times that we are in. Previously, I think it's a bit harder. You have a lot of social interactions with your colleagues and so on, and there may be favoritism and so on. But in the new norm of work from home, and maybe that may be the situation, at least for the next year, where 80% of the time we'll be working from home in front of a camera. Then this sort of partiality, maybe from an AI perspective, systems could be built to actually measure how productive you are. Working with the tools you have on your computer, so the metrics can be very, very precise. Unlike previously, where a lot of the metrics are not easily quantified. So we'll see.
Okay, Rudy.
So I think it's an interesting question that was asked. I think it's not only work that matters. So when we talk about fairness, like fairness of opportunity. I think what will really help shape this is, what the world looked like pre-COVID, what the world looked like in COVID, and what the world looked like post-COVID. And we as human beings are social animals, right? And unfortunately, one of the byproducts of a social construct is how we interact, how we relate, how we connect. And some people are better than others with regards to that. So I like what Avik mentioned around how to mitigate that. How do we think about it proactively and make sure that we are consciously aware of this risk and put the necessary steps in place to mitigate the consequences, to narrow down partiality. Because it's a lot more than just work. Work is actually a lot more than just work.
What do you think, Brent?
Yeah, I love this question, especially in the context of machine learning, right? Machine learning models are more robust with a diversity of data used to train them, right? That's the way it works, right? I believe that it's also true that for any solution, any output, any work that gets done, if you have a diversity of people coming and contributing to that solution, that's going to actually be a stronger solution than a homogenous workforce, right? So I think partiality, being able to select and look at different viewpoints coming in to provide the solution that you're looking for actually matters in the context of the work that you're trying to get done. So I think partiality at work is actually a pretty good thing. Partiality meaning diversity, not anything else than that.
I also think with the advent of AI, there would be, because what I've seen in the last 20, 25 years since I've been working, is that we most of the time don't get the right person or with the right skill set to deliver that job, and that mix is always missing because the guy who actually selected the person to be interviewed in the first place was not aware of the requirements fully, and if the machine was able to match the talent with the job profile, I think it will become much more easier, and the people who will get to interview will be very different to the people who were otherwise getting on to interview. I have a very old understanding of this, that they say, how they find people to get a job, the recruiters, they look for keywords and do Control F and Control H and find out whether, for example, and I had that problem when I was at Accenture. I interviewed 200 people in a year. Now, what was happening was I was looking for people with SAS background, and the recruiter would go in and type in SAS and look for a SAS. The SAS is such a wide tool that someone who's creating a report is also doing SAS, someone who's doing analytics is also doing SAS, someone who's writing predictive models is also doing SAS. And I would get people who had no idea about what I was doing, and they were SAS guys because they were writing some SQL somewhere. So I think that will happen, that the job profile will match the talent, and I think it will become better as AI kicks in. In other words, I don't use the word AI, sorry, when the analytical or modeling actually kicks in, statistical modeling kicks in. Okay, very quickly, the next comment is from Tammy, and she says, I'm scared. Tammy, hi Tammy. The objective was not to scare you. The objective was to educate and learn from these guys. If we've scared you, we're very sorry. Apologetic on that. Kenneth Anthony asks another question. How do you solve the choice problem, autonomous driving, and the trolley problem, an accident scenario, to either crash into a child or an elderly?
I'll take a quick stab at that. So what we're talking about, the trolley test has been around for a while. It was promulgated by Philippa Foot. So it's the philosophy discussion when you talk about consequentialism versus utilitarianism, right? The one was advocated by Jeremy Bentham and I forget the other philosopher, Immanuel Kant was the other one. And it's really about understanding these philosophical constructs and how that then get embedded in the development of AI. So just for the benefit of the audience, consequentialism basically just means that what will be, and it's fated to be that the car is speeding down whichever road and killing whoever it is, whether it's the driver inside or the 5 people on the outside. And utilitarianism means that, in the split second that it takes for the self-driving car to make the decision about who to kill, the greater good survives. So if there's 5 10-year-olds that it's going to kill versus 2 60-year-olds that's in the car, it'll then make a calculated decision about the value of life. And that's really the biggest question that we talk about here, is this construct about how do machines value human life at the end of the day. So that's the current schools of thought around this specific question, Kenneth.
And to be honest, before I get to the other guys, I think post-COVID, we have a very different value of life. Even humans need to identify, to figure out the value of life, because it's all become a number these days. So how many people died due to COVID? And there is a number going on. Anyways, Brent, what do you think?
You know what? I don't think I have anything to add beyond what Rudy said. He framed it up pretty well. It's an open question in my mind, and I can't really frame the problem any better than what Rudy just did.
Okay, Avik.
So I think Rudy framed it pretty well. I think value of life is a discussion that we couldn't argue in court. So I think the only tangible thing, if I were to argue, was that will he get the same sentence if he killed Group A versus Group B, and based on that we can take a decision in the real world. And the rest I think is very theoretical.
Okay, Laurence.
Well, I'd like to bring an engineering slant to this. If this car is really autonomous, this accident would not have happened, because with the sensor on board, he would have detected the child or the elderly person 100 meters away.
Yep.
The only time this accident will happen is there's a fault, a brake failure, for example. Then that's an accident. That is not an ethical question at all. It's just an accident because it's a mechanical failure. Mm-hmm. But if the AI is functioning properly, this accident would never have happened. So, the question is moot.
Yeah, fair point. Fair point. Okay, and Kenneth, hopefully you've got the answer to that question. Kenneth asked the other question, which is, do you hard code at this decision point? How do you arrive at this? Do you let the model make the decision? How does liability play? And I think we've discussed these questions quite in detail during the course of the session. If anyone wants to add something here to this question, guys. Avik? Right? No? Okay, fine. I'm
good.
Yeah, Avik?
I'm good.
Okay, good. Okay, let's get to one other question from LinkedIn. Okay, here is a big one from LinkedIn. Lethal force must, this is from John Sadder. Hi, John, how are you? Lethal force must carry systems of governance associated with them of moral conscience, as well as accountability for their action. An algorithm does not discriminate in its execution of instruction. Policymakers serve society best with decision of conscience. The military-industrial complex sadly lacks the same outlook. It would be frightful to remove the emotional component of the decision from the act of taking human life. The act of dissociation is hence a major concern, whereby we as, and that's it. It's a comment. Well taken, John. There was no question there. Okay. The next comment on LinkedIn was from Mendu Chakrapani, and he says, change is a must and India is changing. Okay. Next one from Tammy. She says, we cover our cameras and speakers. That's a
Tammy's
good one.
Still scared.
Yeah, she's still scared. Okay. Pradeep Kumar Patel on Facebook. Hi, Pradeep. How are you? And Chetan Hubbard says no. So this is the answer to the question where we said, whether they should get the artificial intelligence should get the same rights as human intelligence. No. Okay. Ian Green says no, they should not get the same rights either. Good stuff. Okay, Chetan Habur says AI depends on past data, human intelligence from a lot of experience. Oh, yeah, that's a good one. But isn't that data drives experience? What do you think, guys?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's two completely different perspectives, right? So what we'll see is this evolution of AI being really good at processing large amounts of what we call hard management functions. So lots of data, lots of statistical analysis, etc. I think as we as human beings evolve in terms of leading in an AI first world, what we'll see is a much higher focus on softer skills of leadership that really starts to matter. So how do we inspire creating safe spaces for people to do their best work? How do we as leaders ensure that we are empathetic, that we understand how to manage factors outside of just hard numbers and data? And then how do we complement these two worlds so that we can actually make the best sort of decisions that can lead our organizations moving forward? I think the nature of leadership itself is going to change in an AI first world.
Okay. Anyone wants to add, or should I move to the next question?
I'm good.
Okay, next comment. Chetan Habur says, this is about the AI, who defines the ethics of AI. He says should be defined by the company. Mendu Chakrapani says lethal force must carry systems of inclusive growth. Yep, of course it should. And finally, I've got a comment from Kenneth who says thanks all for all the good work and all the answers to his questions. And thanks, Kenneth, for all the questions. They were very, very topical and very, very to the point and very clear. Thank you. Okay, guys, that's all we've got, and we've done 1 hour and 30 minutes. We decided 1 hour, but we've gone over 1 hour 30 minutes. Thanks to the questions from the audience. Great questions, Kenneth. You rocked it, and everyone else. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you for your time. One thing before you go, what do you want to say in summary as one-liner on AI and ethics? I will start with each one of you, one by one. So let's go with Brent.
It's all in the data. It's all in the data.
It's all in the data. Rudy?
Ethics matter.
Sorry?
Ethics matter.
Ethics matter. Laurence?
AI is not magic. It's just maths.
AI is not magic. It's just maths. Avik, how do you summarize this?
I think we have to start discussion or thinking on the ethics at the design phase of the application. It shouldn't be afterthought.
Okay, good stuff. And before I go, I will have a comment on LinkedIn from one of my mates and the guy who was on the show last 2 days ago, Marvin Rogier. He says, amazing team. Good stuff. That's all I've got for today, guys. Thank you very much for your time, and I will speak to you later. Thank you.
Thanks, Shaylee.
Thanks, Shaylee.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay. So, guys, those were the very senior leaders in AI. 4 of those are from 3 different continents, 4 different countries, and it was great to speak to them. Hope you guys enjoyed the show and learned a bit out of it. Thank you for watching the show. There were, in my view, what I've seen the numbers on the screen, there were around about 50 people at any given point in time watching. So guys, thank you for your trust and watching us. If you've got any questions, please put that in the comment section. I'll try and get those answered by the guests. Also, if you want someone to watch on the show, please mention their name in the comment section, and I'll reach out to them to get them onto the show. Thank you very much, and I will be back next week with another guest. Thank you, and bye now. But before I go, one thing, if you're watching me on LinkedIn, please follow me so that you get alerted. If you're watching me on Twitter, please follow me on Twitter so that you get a message when I go live. And on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel and smash the bell icon. It is of great help. Would love to hear from you and also see you following me. Bye now.